was myself and Jan Hammer for most of the record. Then I had guests like Phil Collins and Bill Bruford and who else? Tony Levin. And it was great, man, being up there. Let me tell you, horseback riding and having your own cabin and everything was kind of cool. So yeah. Anyway, that message you gave me.
Yeah, 45 years ago.
You were at the Woolman skating rink? In 1978? That was you? So about 10 years ago, I was on tour in Europe, with my band. And at the time, the band they were all European based. And in fact, Peo was part of that group. And on days off, they would fly home. And I was in this hotel room thinking, man, what am I gonna do with these days off? So I thought of, I had it in the back of my mind for a long time to do something with the Beatles. Because I still love the Beatles. And, I grew up with some, that was a great era, wasn't it? The 60s was incredible. So I always had it in the back of my mind to do my own arrangements with some of those classic pieces. So I was just looking for a studio around where I was at the time, which was, I think I was in Prague, and on my way to Germany. And it just clicked. Like, man, what about Abbey Road? Wouldn't that be cool? So I called a friend of mine in London and I asked him, is Abbey Road still happening? He goes, you know what? I don't even know. I said, well, find out for me. So he calls me back. He says, it's fully operational and 3 rooms are packed, and except they got 1 day open next week. I said, oh my God, book it. So I flew over to London. And this next piece we're going to play was the first piece I recorded, the piece entitled Because. Some of you might recall as a John Lennon piece. And that 1 day turned into 3 days, 2 more days opened up all of a sudden. So I got 3 pieces that I was really, really, really happy with. And it's the first time in a very long time that I felt like a kid in Disney World, 5-year-old. That's the thrill that Abbey Road had for me. And then after 3 pieces, obviously, I had to go back to New York and attempted to record the rest of it, but couldn't match the sonic quality of the Abbey Road recordings. So I figured, well, I gotta go back. Not a bad place to go back to. So before going back, I took the time to arrange the rest of the pieces like Penny Lane and I Am the Walrus, and all of those other great pieces. And it took a lot, whatever time I needed, but I wanted to get away somewhere where I could seclude myself. And a place I've always wanted to go was out on Eastern Long Island and just rent a house and just kind of seclude myself. So I did. I looked in the paper. It was right before Labor Day. I found this little house, quite reasonable. And I called the guy up and he says, you sound like a nice guy, he said to me. I said, yeah. I didn't tell him who I was or anything. He says, but if I rent you the house for the 5 days, my wife and I are going to California, so I think you can have the house for 5 days. I'll call you back to confirm, but you have to be really cool because your next door neighbor is kind of a big celebrity in town. I said, hey, no problem. So he calls me back to confirm. I said, okay, now you got to tell me who it is. He said, Paul McCartney. So, I had to look for a tissue. I just couldn't, it's like winning the lottery. You don't win a lottery. That's like winning a lottery. So I put in the GPS. I go out there, and he's there. He's there in the front yard with his wife and some friends. I go, man, this is surreal beyond belief. So I spent the next 5 days watching him pull in and out of his driveway while I'm arranging his stuff, this record that I'm in the middle of making at Abbey Road. And I told him that. I had met him a few times. He's a great guy. I didn't tell him who I was. He didn't know. I'm sure I just felt like he might not know. So I didn't tell him. But if he was with somebody that knew me and they introduced me, that would have been a different thing, right? So anyway, I saw him pulling it out with this brown Rolls Royce, okay? And he also had a dark green Bronco, I remember. So anyway, a year later, the CD's finished. I'm really, really happy with it. This time I went with my fiance. She goes, what you gotta do is you gotta write Paul. Yeah, a couple of paragraphs, whatever, what the Beatles meant to you growing up. I said, hey, it's a good idea. Put it in the CD. So that's what he did. I wrote it out, put it in the CD. He pulls in the driveway with his brown Rolls Royce, and she goes, now run down there and give him the CD. I said, oh no. Everybody hands CDs. I don't want to be one of those guys. So she goes, give me that thing. She grabs it. She runs down there. I swear to God, as she was running over to Paul, I said, I'm gonna marry that girl. That's what I did. That's my story.